This is the comic. This is the comic BEDLAM by Eclipse Comics and written and drawn by Bissette. This is the cover. As you can see, it's kind of like pretty monstrous. You know, there's a lot of monsters on the front, so that kind of entails what you're getting into, I think, reading this. So this is the first page, and it's kind of, the way I interpreted this page is it's kind of like dreamy, like it's very much what you'd imagine like a good dream to look like. And I think they even talk about that like in the first or the second box. They kind of talk about there is an object which dreams, and so I think if they were trying to show a dream or what a dream might look like, I think they did a good job with that. And this one's called Low. So basically you see a flying like monster, I think that's what that is. And so basically they just talk about how like the dreams, like he was coming, I think. So that's kind of what that one's about, I think. Not too much to say about the first page. And so then, again, these are the second pages. I'll show this one first, and then this one. Yeah, so I think this is sort of like a monster, like some sort of big bug is kind of what I took it for. It looks like a bug to me. And so, yeah, I think they did a good job of like illustrating that thing right there. I just like that. And so then he said, the monster said that he feeds from this place and he drinks from this place and it will never like run dry. He says that right here. Right here. And so that's that page. And then this is an ad about Miracle Man, which I also read. One of these times I read that. That was a good one. And then there's this page called Sneaky Pete. And this one to me was well illustrated. I feel like they did a good job of making him look pretty like rough and old and scruffy, as you can see. And he's drinking a drink called Night Train Express, which, I don't know, I don't really know what that means, but I feel like it just means something. I just can't tell you what it means. It seems important though. And so this is him, the guy, standing in front of this other man's car. He stops like the traffic, as you can see. He might even be drunk. I don't want to interpret that, but he might even be drunk, and so that's why he's acting this way. And so then he lifts up the front of the car, and then the other guy gets out, the guy with the hat, he gets out, and he looks like he's gonna punch him, but then he looks straight in his eyes, as you can see, the white, like, glare, kind of streams down from his eyes right there, as you can see. And then he kind of, as I took this, he, like, kind of became old step by step. He became old, and they kind of became friends. And then, as you can see in the last box, the car is just there. And maybe abandoned it. I don't know. And that was the end of that. That was an interesting one, though. And then there's this one called Forgotten Fears of the 50s. And so this one on the front is called The Day After Tomorrow. And as you can see, it's just like, you know, a lot of explosions, like kind of just gory stuff. Like, I think that even might be like a skeleton zombie looking thing. I don't know. Just kind of creepy. And they also talk on the bottom, this guy talks kind of about how it's the Twilight Zone a little bit. So I think that kind of shows what you're going to start reading about with this. And so, like, a lot of these ones are about like white picket fence sort of stories, and kind of like in the 50s how they were sort of like making a commentary, one might say, about those old stories and what it was like. And so, yeah, so this page, you see like some dragons, and then there's a drive-in theater, which I know that was pretty popular back in the day. So that's probably why they have that. And then there's like I think that's like, it says candy gum on it and Bud on tap up there. So that also might, because that was relevant. And so then this one also, you can see like a man barbecuing. And so that might also be a part of like the white picket fence, how that was popular. And also kind of creepy though, because you can see like, you don't really know what's going to happen. There's a head on the barbecue. You can kind of use your imagination with that. Kind of creepy. And then you also kind of see like terror. They use the word terror, which is, normally pretty horrific. Yes. And then this to me is like a movie tape going up. Here, let me show you a better like angle of these. So that's that one, just so you can see better. And then this is the other page. And that to me, that like line going up is kind of like a movie tape, I think, like pictures of like the movie. That's what I took it as. I'm not really 100% sure. And then there's another one down here about like, they're basically advertising. They say, woman, open your purses, men, come pay, essentially. And then you see this one, pretty creepy. It says the curious thing, and there's sort of like a weird, I don't know what that is, kind of animal, I guess, and then a monster down here, and then this guy saying that this was actually probably for the other story, but he said, sigh, yeah, life was sure a lot simpler back then. So, and there's like a skeleton, and I don't know, he just looks kind of messed up, and I don't know. And so then, yeah, the next story, curious thing, that's what it's called. Like I said, the animal. And so this one's no words, mostly pictures, but as you can see, like, clearly they're in space, and then there's a comet, and the illustrations are good because I think they do a good job of showing, like the creepy factor, and like that it's kind of a little bit disgusting. And then the next page, you see the same animal. He's flying, and he has stuff like, he's like slime like dripping off of him, kind of weird. And then this one was pretty interesting to me at this last page, because it's like the monster, he like that's like snot, but it's also like a baby, and then he says it's a boy, so that's kind of funny, but also a little bit mad, like kind of just disgusting, sure. And then these two were just ads. I'm not really gonna go too into depth about these. I'll just show you. It says like post-apocalypse, it's 1999, if you're not dead, you're crazy, so do with that what you will. And then just that one. And then this was the last one that I read, and it's called Cell Food, as you can see. And basically this one to me was just like pretty gory and like just a little bit like intense, because it's a little bit like hard to follow at first, because you're kind of like, okay, he's just a guy in a cell, and like, but as you can see, he's dragging his hand along the cell, and then it's getting all like just his bones and blood, and like just like he's clearly not well. And so then like the narrator is just kind of like, I want to say like taunting him almost. It feels like he was kind of like asking him questions, observing him. And I don't know, I think the initial narrator was just someone we don't know, but then I think eventually the guy in the cell, started narrating, like later on. And so then you see this one, and they talk about how he started, like it was just like pain, he felt pain, and then he was still dragging his hand, and then he started yelling, so then blood started like flying out of his mouth, which is not good. And then he has like images, like he starts daydreaming about like his mom making food and stuff, because he doesn't have food in this cell. And so then he shows that, and he's eating like slime, like this green slimy goo on the ground, which is kind of nasty. Like, sorry, let me show that better. As you can see on that page, he's eating like slime off the ground. And then flash forward, he's talking to his mom in one of his daydreams, and then he's saying she made the best food, and then she asks him right here to go knock down the hornet's nest. And so then he shows him knocking down the hornet's nest over here. He knocks down the hornet's nest, and he puts them in like this, what one might say, kind of like a cell, I guess. But like it's more of what they call it was kerosene rags. So it's like to kill them. And so then they start like kind of, you know, like looking white and weird, so they're dead. And then the narrator says, "Quit daydreaming." So then he kind of comes back to reality, and he realizes the things that he's been eating, the slime, like, is the dead, or like the hornets, like his dead hornets. So now he's kind of trapped in this cell, not the hornets, but they're also trapped too. But it's like, that's just what I took it as, is like, he's also trapped in there with him. Maybe karma, I don't know, Twilight Zone-ish, sort of. And so, yeah, then he just realizes that, and I'll show you a better picture of this, and then that's the end. And then another ad, and another ad at the back, but